Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wandering Podcast, where we take advisement from outside the box. I'm Rihanna Ritter, your host. I'm an intuitive, sexuality, and authentic expression coach. Are you an accomplished professional who plays the part of having it all figured out? Who's strong for everyone else, but feels lonely, misunderstood, like you can't tell anybody the truth about how stressed you are, how not passionate you are about your life and all that you've created? I guide my clients to deep, lasting fulfillment. I re-engage them with their bodies, their pleasure, their desire. I help them align to enjoy fulfillment and prosperity in all areas of their lives.
Today, my guest is author and professional speaker, Jim Carlough. He's the host of the Leaders Roadmap podcast and author of The 6 Pillars of Effective Leadership. Thanks for being here today, Jim. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I think that your audience and kind of what I do and talk about will resonate well. And I'm just looking forward to having a discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, take me through how you ended up in leadership and developing leaders, like maybe your background through childhood to how you kind of went down that path.
So childhood is an interesting thing. And we'll start there because when I was 5 years old, I grew up in a small town in New Jersey, and the postman still walked the route delivering mail. And I would meet him on my front porch. And this was in a time in the early to mid 60s where it was safe to walk, right? And you didn't have to worry about, and this was a very safe town. And so I would walk with the mailman on his route. And we would walk, and the discussion was always, what do you think you want to do when you grow up? And this guy was working on me when I was 5 years old. And I said, I don't know, but what I do know is I don't want to do all this walking. And he sort of chuckled at that. And he said, well, what would you want? I said, I don't know. I'd like a big desk. He said, well, if you want a big desk and you don't want to walk, you want to be a lawyer.
Mm.
And I went from 5 years old all the way into getting into college thinking I'm going to be a lawyer. And
Wow.
I majored in psychology because I thought understanding people would be a good entree to being a lawyer. I never became a lawyer. I at the end of I'm going through college and I'm having fun understanding people and learning about people and how to adapt and work with people. And I decided that I need to enter the business world. And so that kind of is the path that kind of took me in that direction. And so my leadership started, I think, also at an early age, because the year I graduated college, I also got elected to public office. So in the town I grew up in of 13,000 people, I got elected to be a city councilman. Now, it wasn't a fluke because 3 years later, I got reelected and my running mate lost when I ran for reelection. So it wasn't like he said the first time, which was, don't worry, I'll carry you through this election. And the second time he lost and I won. And I didn't have the heart to say, I told you so. And I didn't say that to him. But I think my leadership, that's really where my leadership first started. And I'm a firm believer that people are not born leaders. You learn and you develop over time. When I think of my first professional manager job in corporate America, and I look back at the way I managed at the time to the way I manage today, I feel very sorry for the people who worked for me back in those very early days when I had no idea what I was doing and probably gave some of the worst advice I could ever give people. And still we survived and, we made companies money. But this has been a lifelong journey. And so that's really how I got there. And there's different components that I've picked up along the way. by having have worked for some very great leaders in my career and some people who taught me a lot. And I also worked for some leaders who were less than that. And I think probably your audience can resonate with some of that. It's not like, 80% of the leaders are bad and 20% are good. Or I think the percentage of leaders that are poor are probably very, very small, but they do exist. Anyway, so that's the long story. And then we can kind of fill in from there if you have questions.
Yeah, this is interesting because your perspective about like the percentage of leaders being small, because it really has so much nuance to it, whether somebody is a good leader or not, and the people who are being led by that person, whether they're good, coachable. You know what I mean? So, like from my experience, my teachers growing up, I just had the best teachers. Like I had two teachers throughout my whole education that were just poor teachers that I couldn't learn from. And then, I spoke to somebody else and they had the opposite experience. So they had all pretty terrible teachers and only one or two good ones. But those one or two good ones, were so memorable and inspirational that they really helped this person to develop and reach for something more than just the bottom and the basics. So go ahead.
No, you're so correct because I think I truly believe teachers are undervalued in society, not socially, but economically. I don't think we pay teachers for what we're asking them to deliver with our children. I really don't. And my sister was a teacher and she's retired now. And I mean, she loved it. She taught for, I don't want to give away her age, but a very long time. And, but there's just something about their willingness to take your child and to make something of your child and help them learn.
Yeah, absolutely. They're so important in our society, and I agree, we do undervalue them. So you grew up with a dad who was he a career military person or was he just drafted in World War II?
Um, I he probably was drafted. He didn't enter the. I don't think he entered the military. Um, he could have volunteered. I actually don't know the answer to that question, but he did serve in World War II. He didn't see action. He was a sergeant in the Aleutian Islands, and he managed. It was the mechanic crew that worked on jeeps and tanks and or whatever they had in their arsenal, and that was his role in the military. But he served, and then at some point, I don't really remember or I don't know what year it was that he exited, whether it was at the end of World War II or whether he exited prior to that.
Okay. Yeah, that might sound like a odd, irrelevant question, but if when you have kids who grow up with a parent who is more of a career military person, there's a certain authoritarian way of being because that's how you're trained when you're in the military. And so I was curious how much influence that had on your upbringing and like what kind of leader your father was or your mother, even your mother was, that helped develop you into a
So
more.
that's a very interesting question because even though my dad was not a career military person, he definitely had the authoritative view of parenting. Now, I don't want anybody to get the wrong opinion here. My parents never hit us, right? They weren't abusive parents, but dad was very stern. And if mom said, wait till dad gets home, that was never a good sign. But anyway, I had great love and respect for my dad. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2008. Although, ironically, you mentioned my mom, she just celebrated her 100th birthday.
Wow. Amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, so we had a party for her last weekend. But yeah, she just celebrated her 100th birthday, quite a milestone.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so it's interesting that like you said your parents never hit you and like they're not abusive. To me, our parents did hit us, but we didn't think that was abusive. We thought that was normal. Like we thought that was how everybody treats people. So it's funny how we have this wide variety of experience as humans and what we think is normal and then what we carry forward as leaders.
That's true. I mean, I will say, there was a time or two where dad would say, "Don't make me take my belt off." But he did it more as a threatening thing, not as a, I'm going to sit here and whip you. And my mom, ironically, had this wooden paddle, and it was about a foot long. And I remember the words on it. It was pre-printed and it said, "Put me to work." And the first image on it was spanking a child. The
Oh
second
my
image on
gosh.
it was using it as a ruler to cut fabric or something. And there were images all around the words that were in the middle that said, "Put me to use." And I know once or twice she took that paddle out and pointed it at my direction, but I don't ever recall her using it on me. So
Yeah, I mean, back then that was considered normal parenting to actually hit children. And so, like, it's really cool to me that you had parents in the 60s who never did that, like, who actually didn't do it. Because so many people, it's one of the easy way outs of raising children. And so
I would
many
agree.
people do it.
Yeah,
So
I
you
would agree.
have,
It is the easy way out.
yeah, yeah. And it's actually, it's funny because being raised that way, I went to try to spank my daughter and I just couldn't like get the strength to do it. It just didn't feel right. So, having my own kids, I started doing a lot of inner work and examining the way that I was raised and the beliefs that I had. And like you, as you said, being a leader in your younger days, you feel sorry for the people that were you were managing. Like Carolyn Mace, she's a theologian, spiritual teacher, and she, in one of her talks that I was watching recently, said, you know, she can be a little, callous. I'm all about therapy and feeling your feelings and stuff, but she said, I don't want to hear about your childhood and your feelings. How many people do you realize are in therapy because of you? Because there are a lot. It's like, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. When you think about that, it's like, yeah, we all have these, expectations about how we need to be treated, and it's just there's no right and wrong, right? There's so many different possible shades.
There's so many different shades of gray. To sum it up that way, it's not black and white. It's not black and white for sure.
Yeah. So your book, The Six Pillars of Effective Leadership, can you give us an overview of what the six are?
I can. But let me take a step back first and tell you how I got to six. That might be helpful because when you go through the six, someone will always say, "Well, what about this or what about this?" And those are all potential pillars. But I started with a list. So I started mentoring people about 25 years ago. And I noticed a common thing in the people that I was mentoring who wanted to become better managers. And that was they were very smart people, but they didn't understand people. And no one ever taught them how to truly manage people, not by a belt or a paddle or anything of the sort, but understanding how to relate to them. Compassion and empathy is an example. That's not something that's easily taught. That's something that you really have to learn on your own. And I know for one, in my early days of leadership, I lacked both. And so I sat down about a year and a half ago, and I started speaking more and more about leadership. And I thought, if I'm going to speak about this, I probably should put something in book form that people can follow for to increase credibility and also kind of the message that I'm trying to send. So I had a list of about 15 items. And I said, I can't write a book about 15 items because you can't implement that. So then I narrowed it down to what I thought was the most important ones. And I had no number in mind. And it just turned out it ended with 6. And so that's kind of where we started. And I've been asked the question, is there a follow-up book with another 6? I don't know yet, but there potentially could be. And actually, I would ask your listeners, after hearing this episode, write in comments what you took or what you thought. And in fact, and we've not talked about this, but for the first 3 people who do, I'll send them a free book. So if you'll just need to let
Amazing.
me know who it is, and they have to be, and pass me their comments and what they took from today's episode, and I will mail them a courtesy free copy of the book, not an ebook by email, a real copy of the book, because I would like that feedback. So,
Awesome.
but back to the pillars. So I settled on 6. The first one, and the one I say is non-negotiable, is integrity. I think in America today, we've lost integrity in the realm of leadership, in the realm of government, in the realm of everywhere we look, the media. And to me, I learned at a very early age, integrity is non-negotiable. And anyone who's ever worked with me or for me, or I've worked for, would always tell you, Jim will always go down the center of the road and always make consistently the same decision, regardless of regardless of the situation or whatever. And to me, that's non-negotiable. And ironically, I learned that the week after I got elected to be a city councilman. The city manager asked to speak with me, and I went and met with him, and he sat me down and he said, I'm not going to give you advice or tell you what to do, but I'm going to give you a question that I want you to ask yourself every night when you put your head on your pillow. And that question was, have I done anything today for my own personal benefit and gain at the expense of another individual, group of individuals, organization, team, or whoever? He said, if you can answer no, you can rest peacefully. Do you know I've asked myself that question every single night since 1983? And I have never answered that question yes. It has
It's
always
a big
been no.
question.
It is a big question, but if you think about the power of that question, I have carried that through my entire professional career and have tried to instill that in everyone around me. You know, during the days of selling vaporware, I would never get involved with selling vaporware software. If it didn't exist, we're not selling it. But people did, right? Or knowingly selling a defective product. That is not something that's in my DNA.
Yeah.
And it was it really felt like I got hit by a brick when this gentleman, you know, kind of, because I really had to think about it. And I was like, what am I getting myself into? But the reality is it was very, very helpful guidance and something that I continue to do today.
Can you
Um,
imagine if all of our politicians asked themselves that question every day? All of our corporate leaders, all of our,
I totally agree. I totally agree. So it was funny. I was talking at the University of North Texas 2 months ago, and we were talking about leadership, and I was talking about the pillars and how integrity was non-negotiable. And in the second row to the far left of me, in the first chair, sat a young lady who raised her hand up in the middle of the presentation after we had gone through most of the pillars and said, I need to ask a question. If integrity is that critical, why isn't it the foundation of the pillars and not and versus a pillar of its own? And I remember where she sat. I mean, she hit, and I didn't think about it, but mine being non-negotiable with integrity does make it the base that all the others will fit upon. So I think if I had to rewrite my book, it would be a statue or the base foundation. I'd have to change the imaging, but she, you know, she was absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Because without that foundation, the other pillars won't be able to stand upright. And so the next two pillars are compassion and empathy, and both are very, very different. And being able to show compassion or being able to show empathy is not something you can easily pick up in a book and say, okay, if I do these 5 things, I have empathy. If I do these 2 things, I have compassion. No, you have to experience it. You have to develop it. You have to understand how to respond to it. And so those are the first 3 pillars. And then come some others. The next 2 are stability and focus. You have to be able to show your teams stability so that they have confidence in you. If you don't show integrity, they won't have trust in you. If you don't show compassion and empathy, they'll think you don't care. All of these things will make you a much better leader, and you'll have much more cohesive teamwork, collaboration within each other, and they'll believe in you and will follow you in a storm. And then the last one, and it's interesting that my last pillar is humor. Now, when I say humor, I don't mean being a stand-up comedian, but I use humor to kick things off in meetings. I use humor to diffuse tense situations or situations where we get off topic and we go down a rabbit hole that we don't necessarily need to go down or want to go down, and try to steer people back with that. And I think if a leader's able to laugh at themselves and and do it in such a way to help people come together, I think that's positive, because I think it also humanizes the leader. If you if you if you can't reach the people that you're working with or that you're leading, chances are you're acting unapproachable, right? And that you've got this wall between you and them, and humor breaks that down. And there's not many people who really don't like to smile or don't like to chuckle or laugh, and to be able to do that in such a way that it helps people get through things, I think is always positive. And so those are the 6 pillars.
I love it. So integrity, I think of, um, I think, especially when we're young, we tend to value what people, how we appear to other people. And especially as a leader, when you're standing in front of your team and you're trying to lead them, and like, if you're taking yourself so seriously because you're so worried about how you're being perceived, and like if you put all your self-worth into them perceiving you a certain way, or like you're going to be the perfect leader, you're going to get the project perfect, then you won't have empathy, compassion, you won't be able to have humor about, like, you won't be able to make a mistake and make the people you're working with feel like you're trustworthy and you're a real person. Like, nobody wants to work for a robot. And
Correct.
yeah. So
And that's what it's like. And so, in fact, somebody asked me one time in a discussion like this, when does leadership begin for you each day? Does it begin when you sit down at your desk? And my answer was no, it begins when your feet hit the floor getting out of bed. Because from that moment on, you don't know when you're going to have interaction with someone you work with, or interaction with anyone that's going to impact their day. So, for example, if I had to drive to my office, and the moment I get out of the car, if I don't talk to people between there and the front door to the elevator or whatever, again, I'm going to be seen as unapproachable and, not interested in others and selfish and, into his own head. Or so to me, that interaction is very critical for a leader. And I think a lot of leaders miss that. A lot of leaders think it doesn't happen till I sit at my desk and turn my computer on, and they miss the opportunity to get to know people. In fact, I'll divert and tell a story for a second. I had a team of people once, and there was about 60 or 80 people on this floor. They didn't all work for me, but on this one floor of this office building, probably 40 of them worked in my group. And there was a woman who twice a day came through and picked up the trash and cleaned up the kitchen where people would leave a mess. Her name was Kathy. I spoke to Kathy every day. She always said hello to me, and I'm sure she said hello to others. So one day I noticed some of the people that worked for me would walk right past her and ignore her.
Mm.
So I sent an email out to the floor, and I said, the first person who can tell me the woman's name who cleans the kitchen and takes the trash out for all of us, I'll give you a $50 Starbucks card. What happened next, I regret, but I stood outside my office door and watched like 50 people get up and start running around the floor trying to find this woman. And they cornered her to find her. She got scared. She got scared.
Wow.
And so she went to her boss, who was the head of facilities, and she called me. She said, "What the heck are you doing?" And I said, "I guess I should have told Kathy what I was doing." But I was really trying to teach them a lesson. Kathy was part of our team. She's a human being that had a job to do, did it faithfully, no matter how messy our employees, including me, left the kitchen sink. But every day, twice a day, she would come through and with a smile on her face, clean it. From that day forward, they all knew Kathy's name. And it was interesting to see the interaction every day now that she could have with everyone. And she even felt like she was part of the team. And I really believe before that she felt alienated. So one of my employees came to me and said, we learned a valuable lesson today. And I said, you did? And they said, yes, we should have never ignored her. She was always part of our family. And I said, yes, she was. Yes, she was. And I'm sure those people still carry that story with them today.
Absolutely. How many of us consider somebody to be beneath us because of what we perceive that they do, which a lot of the time we don't even know what they really do. We just are making a lot of assumptions. And I see, I am very much a person who's in my head a lot. And I can be very individualist about problem solving. Like I'll figure out all the technical stuff and then I'll have it in my head and then I'll be like, okay, this is what we're going to do. Here's the project. And then people are like, so when I think back to when I was doing big projects in corporate work, I wasn't really able to communicate the vision to everybody and get their buy-in because I was so determined to get the technical stuff right. And like, I would be like, I appreciate that you don't know what to do. And I would try to, but my focus was not on the people and the buy-in. And I ended up losing an employee because of it, because he was so angry about the change. He just wasn't a person that wanted to do any changing. And he came back later and wanted his job back. But the way that I handled it, I was very disappointed in the fact that I lost somebody because I couldn't articulate why this shouldn't be making you angry, why this is easier for you. Um, and just if I had just taken the time to have a one-on-one conversation with this person and really hear what what his fears were, what he had to say. But I was so about efficiency and getting it fast and getting the A+ that I couldn't take the time to do that. And, you know, I learned a valuable lesson from that.
It's unfortunate, but we all learned similar lessons from trying to be more than what we should be in a situation and not giving the opportunity for people to provide input or collaborate for the better good, right? And I've done the same thing where I've said, okay, here's what we got to do. We got a short period of time, so here's what I'm suggesting gets done. Boom, 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 boom. And then step back and let people say, okay, that's good, that's bad, we should do something different. And sometimes we try to steer it too much our way in a sense to get it done quicker, which really isn't a shortcut. It really creates a bigger problem down the road and one that you end up having to revisit. So I have done the same thing. I have done the same thing.
Yeah, it's so common with the way that we have technology kind of hurrying us through life. And, you know, after the Industrial Revolution and things became more of an assembly line, and you just don't realize that these macroeconomic changes affect the way that you think and the way that you operate as a, like, so much humanity is kind of taken out of you when you become a part of a process. And then, like, you don't realize that this is about the journey, it's not about the destination. You hear people say that all the time, and I hated hearing that, like, it's about the journey, not the destination. And I was like, no, it's about results.
You know, and that's the one thing that I fear most about artificial intelligence and AI is there's not a human aspect to it. And as good as it may be, I still think it's never going to replace you or I. And it's never going to replace the need for you and I to communicate and to be able to work through things. Now, can it write your letter in 30 seconds? Sure.
Yeah.
However, you're still going to have to look at that letter and say, is that sound like me? Right. And so, you know, that was one of the things with my book. I could have taken an easy path and used AI, and I chose not to. And one of the first compliments I received was someone who knew me and knew me well said, I can hear you saying every word of every sentence in that book. And I said, really? And she said, I absolutely can. She said, you wrote this. And I said, well, of course I did. I put my name on it. She said, yeah, but a lot of people are cheating these days, which is true, which is very true. And so anyway, I have to be honest, I did use AI in the sense of doing research for some other leaders' names who emphasize some of the pillars that I use. So in each chapter, I'll make a reference to certain business leaders and where they can find more information about them. And that I used AI for, as opposed to going to the library and doing manual research. But as far as the text of the book, no, I wrote that, and it takes time to do that.
It does, but it's like part of, you know, the humanity part of it, the emotional part of it. Like, emotion is human. And I mean, I have been very practiced at completely rejecting emotion. You know, I was raised that was, my dad used to say mind over emotion all the time. And I took it probably a little further than he really intended. But I became very like closed off and hardened. through that. And, I was thinking about actually using AI to kind of organize my book because I have a lot written, but I'm like, it's not going anywhere. Like, what's the direction I'm trying to take? And ultimately, what I am trying to express is that it's your humanity that makes you a wonder in life. It's not the measures of your income and your property and all the things that you can't take with you in your life that you wish you spent less time on, right?
But I would say that using AI to validate that or to organize that, I don't think is wrong because it's not rewriting it for you. It's just helping you because what I learned was there's editors who review punctuation and there's editors who review flow. And the editors who review flow want to make sure that your book has a natural flow through it so you don't, I'm going to use the word turn off a reader in the middle, but if the reader feels like they're going down 20 different paths, right, in the book, they may close it up and say, I'm too confused. So
Yeah.
using AI to help streamline that is no different than hiring an editor to do the same thing, which most, publishing houses typically will go through, I don't know, 5 or 6 different types of editors before they'll publish a book.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk about the difference between empathy and compassion because they are very different. And I think a lot of people, if you've ever heard the term like empath and narcissist, like, oh, I feel everything deeply. I'm an empath. I don't know how to be in my own frame and know what emotions are mine. And like a narcissist just like sucks off an empath because they don't have whatever, some self-worth. I believe that everybody has both of those things within them. And I also believe that it's really hard to get to compassion when you haven't started with empathy and really, experienced some challenges, trials.
I totally agree with that. So I'll give you a great example of empathy. When I was working at Perot Systems, created by the Ross Perot, I had a team of about 25 or 30 people. This was back in the 90s when computers, some of your listeners may resonate with this, where computers were still green screen and you didn't have a mouse. And we made systems for health insurance companies to pay claims. And this system was developed in the 90s and was green screen technology. And this was in the 2000s when we had come out with Windows technology. And I was given the privilege of taking this team on and also downsizing this team as we converted the customers over to the Windows technology. So I had to find a way to communicate to this group of people that I couldn't afford to lose because we had customers to support, that I understood the situation they were in. And it took me several days to figure out what I would want to hear if somebody was coming to me to tell me my job was going away, but I don't know when it'll go away, right? And because if you came to me today and said, Jim, your job's going away, my resume will be updated by tonight and the job search begins. Mm-hmm. So my sole goal was to get people to believe that I would give them as much time as feasibly possible to find a new job. So I approached them and I promised them 3 things. The first thing I promised them was as soon as I knew that we were converting a customer, regardless of the date in the future, they would know that after that conversion date, that position would be eliminated. That could be 6 months, it could be 3 months, but I guaranteed I would not hide any of that from any of them. Even if a customer terminated, it would still take time to get off the platform. And so they would still have time to be able to begin their search. So the promise was I'd give them as much time as possible. The second promise I made is that I would personally help them if they wanted to learn the new technologies we were building, and I would give them time out of their workday every day to learn the new products, the way we were coding them, the language we were coding them in, so that if they wanted to, when their job was eliminated, we would need them on the new product. And so we could transition them over. The third thing I promised them was if they didn't want to do that, I would help them personally find a job within our company that was suitable for them. And if they didn't want to stay at the company, I would also help them find a job on the outside. 3 promises. The only expectation I wanted, which I would call a win, was that nobody left before it was time for them to go. And I can tell you, nobody left before it was time for them to go. Big win.
Yeah.
The second thing that happened was not anticipated. For 3 straight years, that small group had the highest employee satisfaction ratings in the entire company.
Wow.
Not expected. But when I
Yeah.
think back at it, I put myself in their shoes, which is empathy, and I figured out what I would want as assurances and gave that to them. And they all believed in me and trusted me that they stuck it out and nobody left before it was time. But to then have the highest employee satisfaction scores, I just never expected that. And so to me, there's a great example of empathy and working. You know, I've done some other things that didn't work as well, but that's probably as best of an example that I can think of that I've experienced in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And so by having the empathy and the internal question about what would I need, then you were able to give them a compassionate um, solution, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, the other difference I would highlight between compassion and empathy is um, not taking it on. When you're compassionate, you're not like trying to rescue the person or fix their problem for them, but you are holding their hand through it and giving them some options that leads them to an empowered response. Right.
I would agree with that as well. You're helping them through a situation. You're not putting yourself in their shoes and experiencing it or telling them specifically what to do, but you're helping them through it by being there for them. Totally agree with that.
Yeah. Let's talk about humor. Not taking yourself too seriously as a leader, and kind of how that helps people feel more human. And
I think people, I think we're too stressed out in the world today. I think there's too much negativity going on. I also think social media adds to that. My belief is people use social media as a curtain to hide behind and to, throw their political bomb over the shoulder and then run and hide, right? As
yeah,
the attack ensues, which you won't find me doing. But um, I think that we have to find a way to reduce our own stress and reduce um, the minutia that's coming at us from so many angles, where it's so bad that you can't figure out what's truthful and not truthful, and how much of it is real versus unreal. um, I went to Seton Hall University, which, for those who may know, it's a small Catholic university in New Jersey. The one class I remember the most from my college days was a class called Contemporary Moral Values. There was not a book for the class, but you had to bring in either the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, or the Washington Post. And you had to be able to take an article from the first section and dissect the author's religious background, political background, and what slant they were trying to get you to believe in. I graduated college in 1983. That's how many years ago I learned to figure out and really listen to media. So, and as a perfect, when COVID hit, I stopped watching the news because
I did too.
I didn't feel that there was a news channel that I could believe from an ethical perspective that they were giving me what I needed to know. And it's still rare that I'll watch the weather forecast, but even them, they lie too. So weathermen never get it.
Yeah.
But
there's all this extra stuff they're
there's
putting in. Like, yeah.
That tornado may hit here, but it may hit way over there. But
Yeah.
the truth is, it really taught me to examine the media, which was not the intent. The intent was not to scrutinize the media. It was really to understand even the media has biases, and you're going to be subjected to those biases. Biases, I can't even say the word. Anyway, but it was a very enlightening class. And to this day, I use that skill.
I love that because we talk about journalism. Journalism is always supposed to be this neutral, objective thing, but that just doesn't exist. Science also is not neutral and objective. There's always a belief system. Anytime a human is doing something, they have a belief system and they are trying to, I mean, subconsciously, they're always trying to prove to themselves that their belief system, their existing one, is true. So we will ask the wrong question, or we'll ask the same question over and over in 5 different ways. That we can't ever say that we are objective because we're not.
Well, because we're not. And I think of these people who get these scientific grants who say, I have a hypothesis of X. How many of them finish with that hypothesis versus a different hypothesis and just reapply for this, or still be able to use the grant money, but just twisted it because the outcome was becoming a little different? I don't know the statistics on that, but there's got to be some percentage of that happens because, well, maybe up until now, grant money was flowing everywhere, right? Universities gave out grant money, the government gave out grant money, and how much of that has impacted us? The scary thing that's happening right now is this outbreak of measles. It took us over 50 years to eradicate measles. It has taken less than 20 to bring it back. Less than 20. Somewhere in there is a directional change that we probably should have rethought. That did we really eradicate it worldwide, that it would never come back?
Oh yeah, the likelihood of that is.
And I don't know where that came from, but it just hit me like, here's something that we worked so hard to solve, and yet it's kind of like we took our foot off the pedal to ignore it, and now it's not roaring back. It's not a pandemic or anything, but it's serious enough that we have to think about it.
Yeah. It's interesting how I have this tendency to want to be done with something. Like, once again, I'm a person that's just now learning that it's about the journey, and it rejected that idea for most of my life. But like, to want to be done, okay, that problem is solved, I'm moving on, we can just forget about that. And these things, I mean, it's the human condition is that we're going to continuously have to follow a routine to stay alive. Like, we got to keep eating and breathing and drinking water, and we're never really done with anything until we leave the body.
Correct.
and then that body is done. But like what we know for quantum physics is that energy just keeps, it doesn't, it's not destroyed, it just changes form, right?
It's kind of like my theory of, children who go through the terrible twos. The terrible twos to me never end, they just evolve, right?
Yeah.
And the problems if you have kids, you'll relate to this. The problems just become a little bit more complex year over year over year. And then puberty
So
just
true.
skews everything all up, right? And then everybody hates everybody till they get into college and realize, my parents weren't as dumb as I thought they were, right? And
Yeah,
and so anyway,
so true. The twos went into the threes and then four, and I was like, oh my God, this is not ending. It's so funny.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So how do people find you? How can they work with you? Tell us where to get in touch and your offers.
Uh, great question. Um, I website is very simple. You see my name on the screen. Just put a www in front of it and a .com at the back of it, but don't put a period or space between Jim and Carlough. It's just all squeezed together. www.jimcarlough.com. You can find a contact form there. You can find my phone number there. You can order a copy of the book there. But reach out to me. I really would be interested in your thoughts on today's broadcast. But I would ask you to get back to the host with regard to your input, and she will feed to me the names and the addresses of the 3 winners. How's that? Is that fair?
Absolutely.
But then we'll both get feedback as to today's episode and what resonated and what didn't, or if you have any points that you want to add. So, but that's the best way to get me.
Awesome. Thank you for being here, Jim. And what are the ways that you work with people? I mean, you've got the book, you're a speaker.
I am a speaker. I also do mentoring for people. I have kind of a full plate with mentoring at the moment, but I can help you find a mentor. I very much believe in the mentoring process. I was mentored by many, many leaders in my career and learned a lot from all of them. And so I very much believe in that process. And so even if I can't mentor you, I would certainly be glad to take a phone call to help guide you on how to find a mentor for your specific situation and the direction that you want to go in your career. So again, just reach out to me via my website. I'd be more than happy to help you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Jim. Thanks for taking the time.
No, thank you for having me. This has been a blast. Thank you very much.
Yeah.